Hello, my name is Carmen Crincoli. I'm a data center specialist with Microsoft's state and local government team. Today I'm going to do a quick demonstration of how simple it is to deploy Hyper-V to a new host using the release candidate of System Center Virtual Machine Manager 2012. So on the screen here you see the management console for Virtual Machine Manager. And the first step before any hardware deployment is creating a host profile in VMM. So as you can see, I already have a profile created, and in the description here I have 80 gigabytes telling me how big the system is going to deploy to. But not all of my systems have that much drive space in their boot volume, so I'm going to create a new host profile with smaller disk requirements, and we'll go through and see what it looks like. So the first thing I'm going to do is name it. I'm going to Hyper-V host, and then I'll call it 50 gigabytes because that's how big the volume is. And it's going to ask for a virtual hard disk file. Hyper-V bare metal deployment in VMM uses boot from VHD technology. So we actually deploy a VHD to the hardware and use that to boot up a full Hyper-V image. So you can see here I'm using the same VHD files that are in my virtual machine library, and I have one here that I've named helpfully to understand exactly how big the volume is inside of it. And it tells me a little bit of information, how big it'll be expanded, how much space is needed on the physical hard disk itself. And it gives me the option to say leave it dynamic and don't convert it to a fixed size VHD. However, best practice is to convert it, and since I actually do use this as a production system, I'm going to follow best practice and let it convert. It's going to ask me to make some choices about the hardware, what happens when the actual OS deployment happens. Do I use DHCP on the management address, or do I choose from some of my IP addresses? I'm going to use DHCP. And tell it what kind of system boot partition it's going to be, MBR or GPT. This is a small disk, so I'm just going to leave it MBR. What I want to name the OS volume, whether or not I want it to expand to fill the space or just use the space that it needs. And then if I needed to, some driver information injection. All the drivers for this server we're going to deploy to are in the Windows default Windows image. So I'm going to leave that be. I'm going to add some domain information. I'm going to add my run as account that has permissions to join the system to the domain. Local administrator password for the server once it's deployed. Identity information. And a product key. I'm going to put in a KMS product key. So this is going to tell the system to activate using KMS on my network. I'm showing you the key there. Feel free to steal it if you want. It's not going to help you activate Windows. It's just going to tell the system to look for the KMS service on your local network. Pardon me. I can also, as part of this, say where I want virtual hard disks or virtual machines stored when I deploy virtual machines, but I'm not going to do that. I'll leave that as a post-configuration option for these systems. Once I'm done with that, I'll click Finish. You can see here in the Jobs view, it created a new host profile, and it's completed successfully. If I go back to the main console, you see my new profile has been created here, is ready for a bare metal deployment. So the next step is to actually deploy it to hardware. Alright, so deploying to the server is actually even easier than creating that profile. I've reconfigured the screen a little bit here just so there's one more screen available. You see this text screen. This is actually a remote connection to my hardware via the remote management capabilities. I'm deploying to a Dell 2950 server, and I'm using the Dell DRAC card to give me console redirection. So what I'm seeing is basically a complaint from the system that it has no boot anything, and it booted into Pixie, but nothing was there. So this is a bare metal system, as bare as it gets. So let's switch back to the management console and get to deploying. So I want to add resources here, and Hyper-V host and cluster is my choice. If you've used Virtual Machine Manager before, this interface is going to look familiar, right? This is how you deploy agents and bring systems into Virtual Machine Manager control. Active Directory, untrusted perimeter networks. This is the new one with VMM 2012. Physical computers to be provisioned as hosts. So we're going to pick that one and get right to it. The first question it's going to ask is, what's the run as account for discovery of the systems using management interfaces? So this is going to be the login that I'm going to use in my DRAC. And as you can see, I've already created a run as account for it that contains the appropriate login information. Here I choose the management protocol that you use. These are the two dominant industry protocols for remote server management. The DRAC uses IPMI interfaces, so I'm going to leave that as the default and leave the default ports because I haven't changed any of that. Then it's going to ask for how do I find it on the network? And you can specify a single IP address, a range of IP addresses, or even an entire subnet, and it will go and search and find all of the management interfaces in that range of IPs and show you the list of systems. So you can actually choose to deploy an entire group of new hardware in one shot by simply adding it in here and selecting the appropriate systems. I'm only deploying one, and I know the IP address because we are hard coding in our environment. So I'm going to type it in there. Choose next. It's going to go and check to make sure I can talk to it. Okay, came back. It's saying, okay, what group is it putting in? I'm going to leave it in all hosts because that's all I have right now. And now I get to choose that profile that we created earlier. It's defaulting to the larger one. I know this system doesn't have that much space, so I'm going to choose the smaller one and click next. Now it's just asking me, what am I going to name this system, right? Match this system with a computer name in Active Directory. So I'm going to follow our naming standard guideline here and match the IP address. And that's it. Now when I click finish, keep an eye on that little screen on the right that I showed you before, because I'm going to click finish, it's going to contact the system and restart it almost immediately so that, whoops, we switched over to that view, so that it boots back up and immediately goes onto the network and starts looking for information. So it shows no signal right now because it basically did Control-Alt-Delete. And here's our friendly BIOS page. And it's going to start doing firmware checks and things like that. Now, for the remainder of the video, this is all going to be automated, by the way. For the remainder of the video, I'm going to do a little bit of video magic and cut in and out, just so that it's obvious what's happening and we can talk through some of the steps. But if I actually sat here and recorded, you'd be listening to me twiddle my thumbs. So we'll be back and forth with more information as this goes along. First step is to actually get that virtual hard disk down. So we're transferring the virtual hard disk, same as Virtual Machine Manager does anything. It's using the bits service to transfer it. You can see here it's been going for a few minutes so far. We'll expand it out so you can see. We're 4 minutes in. It's already transferred over almost 3.5 gigs. So it's moving right along. We'll come back to the next step. Next is converting the virtual hard disk, the dynamic virtual hard disk, which was about 9.5 gigs, to the fixed size that we specified earlier. So this is converting it all the way up to 50. This will probably take longer than the actual transfer did, but it's worth the patience because it's best practice and it results in better performance for the host. When we finished deploying the VHD down, rebooted, and now sysprep is running through, installing device drivers, prepping the system, getting everything ready. And we're done. You see here at the top, the job is listed as completed. And we look, the entire process took, the start time from when I clicked finish was at 7:50. The end time was at 8:23, so a little over half an hour to go from a bare system that was plugged in and powered on, well, it didn't have to be powered on, to a fully deployed Windows host that is in here and ready to accept virtual machines. So I hope you enjoyed the quick demonstration, and look for more of these coming soon.